is up there to remind us of her presence. She is on Zoom and has been faithful about that all week, morning and afternoon. So we are going on to 282. And Patrick, you crunch some numbers or try to do.
Kirby has new language.
Kirby has new language. Okay. So Kirby, come on up. And then I know we have 2 amendments. Something tells me they might be close to strike alls, but okay.
We could go on.
They go there? Okay. So we'll be doing a lot of straw.
I was gonna see Patrick.
Good.
Sorry, disappointing. He's over there.
Welcome to almost the last day. Then we start over next week.
Charlie, did it show up over there for me to connect?
There's next week's a little bit.
Okay, I'm sending you.
Well, they're supposed to be getting a list if possible. Of the people coming.
Starting 11 Wednesday. Like, if I ask, while you're getting set up, are you planning to present either one of the amendments, or what language are you going to present first?
I'll control this committee.
Yeah.
Right now, we're gonna go.
Not yet.
The last time
That's like.
It's met. Right, Kirby has new language for the bill and the discussion we had last week or the beginning of this week. And Patrick had done some numbers. And then we will go through each individual amendment, and I assume there's letters and words and numbers for each of those.
Yes.
Okay. Got my say, pictures. Pictures are good.
So Kirby Key lives in council. I have, if the committee's interested, there's 3 different draft amendments for, a committee amendment for S-282. The chair asked to prepare one that I assume we'll go over first. And from there, I'll leave it to Pat for what he's put in.
Then who had you draft next amendment? Who came to you first? That's how we'll split that.
No.
You know,
Senator Hardy was the,
okay, first through the door.
early bird.
Okay,
Okay. Yes. It told me that was okay. So,
Yeah.
okay, so, so Senator Cummings had asked for a version of S-282. This is, and part of this was, hopefully I understand the ask. It was to take the wealth proceeds tax from S-282 and do a version of that, but that, in a nutshell, this version, bases the tax base for that tax off of the federal NIIT, the net investment income tax, without the additional tax base that was added from the proposed version that was proposed by ITEP originally. And then also changing the threshold amount for tax liability for that. So that's what we'll look at.
first goal on that was for both the tax department and the taxpayer to, and I believe it was Minnesota was one of the examples, stayed as close to the federal form and definition, so you weren't having to do a second entirely different complicated. And I was hoping we could move the base up because it starts now at 250,000, which was set in 2013. And there has been a little inflation since 2013, but I think there's trouble with that number, but that's what I wanted to see, and then we'll have Patrick talk to us about what the numbers look like.
Yeah, so we'll look at all those. I do want to preface it with a couple of things about the drafting. First, I did redraft this from the original proposal in order to try to make it more succinct, to pare it down and better match, as the chair was saying, exactly what's happening at the federal level. So I believe this version does that. And we have tax here to tell me if not. Second thing is that when Senator Hardy came to ask about changes, there was a discussion of the name of the tax and how wealth proceeds tax was possibly misleading. So for Senator Hardy's version, I changed it to investment proceeds tax. And for the sake of just drafting all the same, I'm using this investment proceeds
I
tax.
can never remember the name, so this makes more sense.
And Kirby pointed out that if it's the Vermont investment proceeds tax, then it's the VIP tax. So you can sell it that way.
I wasn't gonna say, I was.
I know you would not. Talking to Senator Lyons, because she's got the expo tax or something down here. She's fine. She's working on it.
So that's it. If you would like me to change it back to what proceeds.
No,
Chair.
that is fine.
So we have just a couple of definitions for this version. It does use federal modified adjusted gross income using the federal definition from the federal NIIT. And it uses a definition for investment proceeds to mean the same thing as net investment income, but as adjusted by this chapter. We have to adjust it even if you take out those additional things from the tax base, because there's certain things that Vermont can't tax, so we still have to take that.
That's right. You can't do it.
So those are the only two definitions for this version. So it's written so that the Vermont investment proceeds tax is imposed for each taxable year on individuals, estates, and trusts subject to the personal income tax. That's just to identify the tax liability. And then it's established as follows. Number one, individuals with federal modified adjusted gross income exceeding 500,000. And for the second part, it's estates and trusts. I'll get to that in a second, but I'll explain number one first. So the chair asked to increase the threshold for being liable for the tax. This means that it doesn't overlap with the federal anymore, because as proposed, it overlapped with the federal thresholds, which were, depending on your filing status, either 200, 250, or 125. So this is 500 for everyone. No more distinguishing between filing status. It would be each individual 500,000.
And that's where all the money came in, because it's that top bracket.
Yeah. Sure, Pat can help us with that. And then the second part here is for estates and trusts. I redrafted this to mirror more closely exactly what is said for the estates and trusts at the federal level. So it's adjusted gross income as defined for trusts and estates at the federal level, exceeding the dollar amount for the highest federal tax bracket, which is for the federal investment tax. That's what they use. So this one is going to be a lower threshold than the 500,000. But it's lining up with the federal return.
Take that 500,000 down.
So moving on, it says taxes imposed at a rate of 4%. That's the same as what was originally proposed. To remind you, the federal tax is 3.8%. Senator Chin and I apologize. You asked me in the hallway what the federal rate was, and I didn't tell you 3.8. I was wrong. So 3.8 for the federal. And a 4% being proposed here. And it's on the lesser of investment proceeds for the taxable year, which goes to our definition up here. It's the federal tax base with a few changes. The lesser of that, or federal modified adjusted gross income for the taxable year reduced by 500,000. So, if your, modified adjusted gross income is lower than 500,000, there would not be any tax liability, even if you did have investment proceeds. But if your federal modified adjusted gross income is more than 500,000, that's when there could be tax if you also have investment proceeds.
From the previous version, it was over 10 grand. Is that still in here, or is it now just any dollar over the investment income? Because I think the federal one, if you made over the 2 or 250, and then if you had investment income over 10,000, wasn't it?
For trusts.
Like, did you not get kicked in that 3.8% until you had over 10,000 in investment income? And you had to make over 200? No, I think it was a different bill.
It's a different bill.
Minnesota. Was that Minnesota?
Yeah,
A million states.
Different state.
Yeah.
If that was the other state that has done something.
Gotcha.
So that's how this is set out. And then for estates and trusts, it's written just to mirror the federal treatment. So it's based off of undistributed. So if there are proceeds that are distributed, then that would go to the individual and be possibly taxable for the individual. So it's only for the estates and trusts that are holding on to the investment proceeds. So it's the lesser of the undistributed investment proceeds for the taxable year, or the highest tax bracket, federal tax bracket for estates and trusts. The language in subsection C and D are the same as introduced, which are for administration. It's just to specify that this tax is imposed like a surtax on top of any other tax, including the income tax. And then there's the provisions dealing with part year and non-resident individuals, and how that will be apportioned like we do for income tax. So the next part is the determination of the net investment proceeds. I mentioned that we have to take a couple of things out, so that's the only thing about this section, is it's taking the federal tax base for investment, for net investment income, but then taking income from U.S. government obligations like U.S. bond income and anything else that Vermont would not have the ability to tax out of it. And so there you are. That's a much simpler version than what we first looked at. The administration will be done like the income tax. So we just bring that in by reference. And it currently has an effective date of January 1, 2026. And we're changing the name to an act relating to the VIP tax. Just kidding. So, that's what I'm saying.
Okay. Thank you. Sure.
I'll say a few things. Well, first of all, I partly why I drafted an amendment was because our conversation last Friday before town meeting gave me the impression that there was committee interest to move something forward. I don't support the bill as originally presented for a variety of reasons. One of them being that I do think people, wealthy individuals, do migrate to tax sheltered tax havens. There is an actual and a concerning amount of people that will leave the state at certain income tax rates, or wealth taxes like this will motivate them for employment and living decisions. So I appreciate that you lowered it. I honestly didn't know, Madam Chair, that you were going to come up with some new language. What I will say is this is moving in the right direction, because I do fear that the more we tax at these amounts, we are going to see people with high incomes leave the state, taking not just losing that marginal amount, but the other amount that they are paying. So what I would say to this is I appreciate that it's lower than the previous amount, but what you'll see in the amendment I'm going to bring forward is it's even lower than this, and it also adjusts out capital gains, which is a concern that I do still have.
Which then we may get into, is it enough money to make it worth it? Lost my train of thought.
I didn't know what else you want to talk about that, but
Yeah, no, I got distracted here. Okay.
So I'm just saying, this is 4% surcharge, right? You're gonna pay the regular income rate and then 4% on the investment part, right?
Yes.
Only on this.
Subset.
4% on this investments now, which we don't tax now. It gets taxed at the federal level. Somewhere where we don't go on the federal level.
These are items that are part of the income tax base also.
So you'll get taxed at your personal income, right?
Yes, when it comes to certain capital gains and certain dividend income, it is taxed at a lower rate. But otherwise,
You will have
same
personal
tax.
income tax, and then you'll have a 4% on top of that. Correct?
yes.
Now, has there been any contemplation of, all right, you had an investment gain, you get taxed 4%. If that next following year, you have that same individual, they still make over 500,000, but they have lost $100,000 investment income. I know
No.
it'll lower their tax liability, but would they then be able to ask for a 4% credit?
No, there's nothing in this tax about like a carrying forward a loss or something. like
Yeah.
that.
Any more than if you got fired, you couldn't ask
On
for
your-
credit on your fire.
On your personal income tax in Vermont, you can have a loss.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
On under the Vermont corporate income tax, you can't have it.
Okay. Questions for Kirby on this one? I'm gonna have Patrick come up and give us the numbers on this proposal. Is this the one you've had some issues with? Or?
Well, I think there's two options. Either Kirby can walk through all three and I can talk about the three holistically,
Okay,
or we can flip flop for each one.
This write-up has all three of ours, like
Yeah.
yours, mine, hers, and Aaron, so.
okay, all right. So let's walk through it and I think since we got Sandra back with a question, but that's.
I don't have a question.
Oh, okay.
Is this mine now, Kirby?
Yes.
Okay, so can I just do a little intro to my thinking on it? So this you'll see is I do the same thing that the chair did in terms of narrowing it to just the whatever the federal structure is, but I kept the income levels the same. Obviously, that's all open to debate. I was just for comparison purposes, keeping them at the 200,000, which is the federal level. But what I did was tied it to our discussions about the education fund. So rather than having the income, I think in the original bill, the income actually didn't go to the school construction fund, correct? That you and I talked about that. Something else went into the school construction fund in the original bill. But what you'll see in this version is that the income, or the revenue from this would go to the education fund, and there would be intent language included that this was to fund universal school meals. And then I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, at this level, there's more money available than what would fund universal school meals. So where I ended was, and you can see it on the screen that Kirby's got it up there, is the OPEB health insurance benefits. And I was trying to come up with a couple of things that we have, sort of added to the education fund in the last few years, that are, that we pay off the top, or so to speak, of the education fund. I tried to come up with a number, as I think I mentioned to you, about sort of mental health costs for school districts, and I poured through a bunch of school budgets, and I think estimating the mental health costs or the social service costs right now would be nearly impossible.
Yeah.
So that's why I stuck with the OPEB, which there is a number. This wouldn't cover both full of those, but the intent would be that's what this additional revenue is to cover, so that we are clear about what the tax would go toward. And then sort of as a nod to the conversation that we've been having with S220, I believe it is. I included provision that would lower the excess spending threshold for school budgets to 115% of the prior year. So that would hold down some of the education costs. And also, though, exempted voter approved bonds for capital
And
construction.
I know we have amendments similar, so
Okay.
I wanna do that,
Because
this one's gonna go to approach.
well, this is, I mean, I've just sort of
Yeah.
put them all together in this bill
Yeah.
to try to make it a package. And then the one thing and Kirby and I talked about this, is to try to, I tried to do what Minnesota did with the farm income, the sale of farm property, but we couldn't come up with something that was equivalent. First, Kirby talked about potentially tying it to the use value appraisal program. There are lots of properties in that. Not all are
By
farm
Adams
properties.
Neighbors and
Yeah, and I was like, no, I don't think that's the right one. So then, there are farm classifications, small, medium, and large farms. So I was trying to tie it to if there was a sale of a small farm, because it's not supposed to be, I think in Minnesota, it was the smaller farms, the sale of the sort of quote unquote family farms. But we didn't get that far with that. If people are interested in that, I think we could probably talk to the Bradley Showman, who's the drafting attorney for ag. And maybe if there's
I've spoken to Bradley, and we could look at the farms that are regulated as small farms, but it's still, not perfect.
Yeah.
We don't have a perfect fit.
No.
But there's things we can look at.
Yeah, so that I was trying to, get there, but we sort of ran out of time.
Let's go
So that's where.
the investment,
Proceeds then.
yes, let's go through that one. And then if we can resolve this bill, then we will go on to 220 and we can meld all of that. If we put that this money is dedicated to, it's gonna have to go to appropriation.
Even though it's an ed fund expense, those are ed fund, both ed fund.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, so that
I will check
It's all
on that,
within the ed fund. I
because there was, but that wasn't within the ed fund, so they were the house was raising taxes and spending it, but we are dedicating this to the ed fund,
Yeah.
and this wouldn't necessarily be money that went to the ed fund.
Correct. I mean, it would have the effect and, depending on where we set all of the thresholds in terms of income and percentage of the tax, et cetera, would have the effect of lowering the property tax by the same amount that we're raising through this tax.
Okay, let's walk through that
Yeah.
first section.
So the differences between what we looked at the first time and this include we do have a definition for threshold amount. Because the amount it's tied to the federal law and one's taken off.
Yeah.
So the first one we looked at taking, since it was 500,000 for every individual, the threshold amount essentially for what we just looked at was 500,000. In this case, it's going to be tied to the federal amounts for each of these categories. So out of all the things you're looking at, this is the one that I would say piggybacks off of federal return the most, because it uses the same thresholds and it uses the same tax base except for the things that we have to carve out for Vermont. And that's really it. It doesn't have the like we were looking at carving out one other thing, the smart farms, but this person doesn't have that because of more work to be done if you want to go that route. And then there is an additional section added here that's just about the deposit of the revenue into the education fund with the intent for the areas that Senator Harley mentioned, universal meals and retired teachers' health and medical benefits fund.
Okay.
And then the rest of this is, we do need to change the ed fund statute to include this revenue. And then sections 3 and 4 related to the S-220 items that we talked about. And that's it.
Okay, so the first section, which I want to do because I want to do the 220 discussion separately. This basically uses the federal law
Mhm.
and the federal numbers and just transfers it. So you're also going to pay this in Vermont. And we treat it includes gross receipts, right? Not gross,
Capital gains,
capital gain.
it does,
Yes.
uses the same tax base, so
Yeah.
that means capital
And we-
gains are included too.
We've still, our intent may be to try and leave out farms. And at one point, someone said the original bill didn't take into account Vermont's farm and small business exemption.
Do you mean the partial exemption for capital gains?
Yeah,
Uh,
I think that's what they were referring to.
yeah, so as long as we have the partial exemption for capital gains, it would mean on your income taxes, you could have capital gains that are excluded partially,
Okay,
but they would be fully taxed by this if you hit all of the benchmarks to get taxed by this.
yes, and that's a lot of things to get.
Yeah.
Okay, but would it be possible to use the Vermont capital gains number, which would exempt small businesses and farms or part of that value?
We could do something like that because the threshold values are already what they are.
Yeah.
If you only had a capital gain, that's say like, let's say you're married and you have a capital gain of less than 250,000. Unless that capital gain brings your modified adjusted gross income up past that 250,000 mark, you wouldn't owe tax under this.
Okay,
Because it's the lesser of the modified adjusted gross income produced by that for married 1,000. So as long as you're understanding that like
Okay.
for smaller capital gains as possible, that it's not going to get hit here.
okay,
But we could look at a way to try to incorporate an exclusion in this. And Senator Chimmons has an amendment that excludes all capital gains.
and do we have any questions on this one?
Can I just ask you
Yeah.
what you mean by including, talking about S-220 separately? Because I was sort of thinking about this as all together.
It's all together.
yeah,
Well, I
so-
have 220 in here with a special. We can look at this and we can look at, but Senator Chittenden, I think, do you also have an amendment to 220?
So close. We just, I don't think it'd be ready to present till tomorrow because we're working on some appeals language. But, so I would have to S-220 language for tomorrow.
Okay, well, because I think, the way I was trying to think of this in the original bill
Package.
is a package of
Right.
how do we reduce property taxes? Some of it is through new income, some of it is for less spending. And it allows, at least some school construction to go through with the exclusion from the excess spending threshold.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
so-
know there's exclusions
Yeah,
that you're doing.
Excluding capital debt too.
Yeah,
yeah. I mean, there was just a bond that was passed with that as one of the
yes.
contingencies.
Well, Martine's hand is up. I'm sorry, Martine.
That's okay. I have a question for Kirby. Hi, Kirby. Wondering, I think in the original bill, there was a a second homes tax, and I think that was the tax that went to the school construction aid fund. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. As introduced as 2D2 included the classifications language from Act 73 and then had half of that revenue go toward school construction aid. What we're looking at here is just versions of a committee amendment that takes out those other parts of S2D2.
Okay, so it would take out the second home tax.
It would, but I would note that House Ways and Means has been working on tax classifications all session.
The,
And it's anticipated that in the next couple of weeks, they'll vote that out of the House or plan to. So it seems, something like, it seems like you could expect to see a version of it. And the version you'll see is the Act 73 framework and then fleshed out more based off of the report that was done by the Department of Taxes last summer that pointed out all of the things to help set the classifications into motion. So you'll just see like a built up version of the same thing.
and I think in Act 73, that money is looked at to cover the cost of the homestead exemption. Our present pay based on your income, because right now that money, if you don't pay $1,000, that money comes out of the fund, so the tax rate has to go up on everyone to raise that. This 73 that we passed says that the money from second homes will offset that exemption. And until we know the value and the number of second homes, we won't know how much money there is. But if we spend it twice, we could end up being counterproductive or ending up having to raise the base property tax rate if we don't raise enough money to cover the exemption cost.
And so the classifications report that I referenced was done because of Act 73 told the department to do it. And part of that charge also involved having the department estimate some what the rates would need to be for the new classifications in order to pay for the homestead and some other things too. So you can look at that Act 73 report on classifications the department put out to see those
That's
estimates. Although
Are we doing that in the second half of the
Yes,
session?
we are
Probably,
doing
yeah.
that in the second half of the
Oh,
session.
can I just finish
Kirby.
what I wanted to say? And thank you, Kirby, for that answer. What I liked about Senator Vyhovsky's bill was that it dealt with second homes regardless of Act 73. And I'm concerned that I'm just concerned about the fate of everything in Act 73, and I liked that it was separated in this bill. So I don't know if there's a way that one of these amendments can include the second home piece.
There's a whole legal precedent for if we pass two bills that do with the same thing, which one takes precedent. And I think if we do that, I think we would take precedent, but I could be waiting for the secretary to come through the door. We could be undermining the other bill that we've already passed. You can't spend the money two places, even if we'd like to.
I don't know if this is helpful, but I believe that when classifications comes back over to the Senate, it will be part of the yield bill.
Yes. I think it does, because yield doesn't have to meet crossover, but they are it is about ready to go, and I think they're planning on getting it out next week. So we will get it sooner than we got it last year, a lot sooner. And then we can look at it and we can redesignate once we have more information. Senator Beck,
I don't have a question.
okay.
Sorry, I keep.
No,
Yeah.
no, just it's going up. I don't want to look like I'm ignoring you. Okay, because you're between me and the screen, so
Right.
you're not in my blind spot over here where Senator Gulick usually is.
So why she's a help.
Still SpongeBob.
Now she's in front of me, but I can't see her hand. Okay,
Okay, so we have the third version of an amendment, which is recommended by Senator Chittenden.
Can you walk through?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You mind if I set it up?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So I also want to say from the outset that I'm already hearing grief from our conversation last Friday that just talking about these taxes sends signals to people about them wanting to possibly flee the state. But I have to acknowledge from the outset, we are the tax committee. We have to talk about taxes, and a big beautiful bill. This is absolutely relevant. I also want to say that after that conversation the Friday before break, I was speaking with, as many of you know, I work at the Grossman School of Business with faculty that are tax accountants and finance. And I was just raising this and talking about it, and they reminded me of multiple examples of faculty that either left the university or as soon as they retired, they left the state in order to achieve better, more favorable tax status. They also reminded me of times that UVM faculty are paid well. I don't think they're not in these tax brackets, not the majority of them. I'm nowhere near these tax brackets. But it was just relevant to me that also in the hiring practices, when we offered extended offers to people that are qualified for positions, more than once, multiple times, people would turn it down because of the tax circumstance that they saw when they looked at Vermont. So my point of all this is that I do feel tax plight is a real thing, and I wasn't necessarily persuaded by the presentation by Dr. Cristobal Young, and I found some of his arguments actually were giving me the opposite opinion. That's neither here nor there, and I see why you don't like debating.
we're not going to fight that.
So similarly, during the break, and this is related to the fourth item of what you'll see in my amendment, a CPA in my district that I greatly respect. I won't use names, okay? But he reached out and he asked me about this, talked about it, and he further validated these concerns because he does work with high net worth individuals. And he said they absolutely will move out of state, and then he started to lay the numbers out. And then the one millionaire I know did reach out. I won't name that name either. Okay. But yeah, he's like, absolutely. He just goes forward.
No.
I know one. So he's a good guy. All right. We'll leave it there. So my point is during that conversation with the CPA, he did also remind me that there is something that we have not done, that 36 other states have done, and 9 states that don't have an income tax. It's irrelevant. So 45 out of these 50 states have adjusted their tax code to allow for a pass-through entity tax, a SALT deduction cap, which was adjusted in the big beautiful bill to have now a $40,000 cap for a period of time. And they reminded me that this is a way that would cost Vermont nothing. In fact, what we had when we passed this through this Senate 2 years ago, last biennium, actually would have raised the state about $5 to $7 million. I don't think we get that much this time. I don't think JFO has done this analysis yet because of the $40,000 cap, but it would be generally, it would be more money to Vermont at some amount if we kept the same construct. And it would save small businesses in Vermont millions of dollars in their federal taxes. And so I'm happy to revisit the SALT deduction cap, but I just want to state that 36, so 45 out of these 50 states, we are one of the 5 that have not adopted this SALT cap workaround. So I have that in there to also not only raise money, but also to just be able to look my millionaire friend and my faculty friends in the eye and say, this is a rational tax adjustment in light of HR1, which I want to acknowledge will benefit the wealthiest Americans with major tax deductions as was presented to us in testimony. So I am supportive of recalibrating our tax code in light of this new federal landscape. And so my objective, my intent that Kirby's going to walk through in a minute here is to do a few things. 1, raise those thresholds to even higher amounts, up to $1 million for a family, up to
Thresholds for when this VIP.
Correct.
Okay.
It's still at the 4%, but that is certainly fungible. But importantly, too, from the discussions and presentations and from these conversations, capital gains is a strategic motive. What you can choose when you take capital gains. And that is an important factor that I also have been told, but like now 3 years on this committee, that a lot of our millionaires in Vermont, I've heard estimates of more than half, which can correct or otherwise adjust that rough estimate, are millionaires for a year or two when they are approaching the end of their successful working life, running their business, and they are liquidating their positions in some entity. And then that is when they make a lot of money, then they use that just like people use their 401ks or 403bs. So capital gains are also, they can choose, they have a great deal of control over when those occur. So I don't want to tax capital gains because I do think that will, from my conversations with my tax accountant friends and CPAs, will drive more tax flight from the state. So what you'll see here is it's the similar constructs otherwise presented, but it entirely excludes capital gains, which cuts the revenues by about 40% or something. I'm sure Patrick will speak to that more elegantly. Two more things. So the intent of what I'm trying to do is not to punish the wealthy for making more money. It is to recalibrate our tax code, drawing revenue from those that can afford to pay it, especially in light of the one big beautiful bill, and to pay for something that this legislature did, which imposed a property tax increase on all of Vermonters, which is the universal deals. And so my intent with the number was to raise about now to 18 million. I don't know from there because we don't have the SALT estimates, and Patrick's going to go through the numbers. I think the paper says about 10 million from the first piece, and then whatever the SALT is. But it's that way. So when you look at these, and I think that my bill would affect 972 Vermonters, when you look at these Vermonters in the eye and say, if this goes into effect, you will pay 4% on the net income investment revenues that you get, these wealth proceeds, this wealth proceeds tax. You would be doing a couple things. One, you'd be feeding all the kids in the great state of Vermont, and you'd be buying down the property tax rate for yourself and for the whole state by about 1%. And a good friend on this committee reminded me, well, actually, if you're one of these 972 Vermonters that would be affected that are making pretty good money, I'm guessing they have pretty nice houses, and a 1% reduction on their property tax bill, in my estimates, would probably save them $1,000 to $2,000. And if they have commercial properties, they're actually looking at even more of a savings. So my point is, they might end up writing a check for $10,000 or $12,000 more in net income, or than this income taxes, but they would be seeing some benefit indirectly through the overall property deduction. The last thing I want to say is the S45 is the last piece. We could talk about that as much as you all want. I just couldn't support the bill as presented, and I didn't know where you were, Madam Chair. So as I saw on the agenda this Thursday, I just sent an email Monday night saying these are some contours of things that I could support based on the conversations with my constituents and the testimony that we've received.
Okay, word of caution.
Yeah.
Do not ever say that their property taxes will go down. They will go up $1,000 less than they would have. Because if we reduce it by it and school spending goes up 6%.
Fair enough.
Don't get caught in that one. What I got from Dr. Chris DeVoe, whose last name I'm forgetting, was that, yeah, it's probably right. Millionaires that are settled are probably not going to uproot their families and move. They might change behavior, so they might not endow a college share. They might not build a fire station for the city or police station. They might not endow the symphony, or that's the kind of behavior we might see if people feel we've gotten greedy and we don't appreciate what they do contribute. The other thing I got is, we want to get them when they're middle-aged and reaching or we want to get them here and get them settled when they're young professionals or they're starting their business, so that when they become millionaires, they stay. We don't want them moving out when they're 35 to get more money. We want to get them and keep them. And there was an article this morning, New England as a whole has seen a mass out-migration in the past year. Massachusetts has lost 33,000. Vermont taking births and deaths, but we are, I think, 700 people less than we were. It is mostly middle income, that group that's still looking to find jobs and move around. They are going. the places with the greatest in-migration. Texas, Arizona, no, Florida wasn't really on that list anymore. And then another article had a list of millionaires. These places have 74,800 millionaires. Very different tax base than we have. I mean, I didn't see anybody else with 1,000. So there is there's always migration going on. But there is out migration. Vermont has lost, and it looks like it's people in their productive years. We know there's a whole bunch of second home in Florida or maybe here, but retirees that are snowbirds and where their residential nest is, I don't know. But we do have that, and the weather, once you're too old to ski, doesn't work in our favor. So we've got some
I know there's a lot in there.
yeah, we've got some workable programs. I'm trying to think of investment proceeds. All right, that's Ruth's that's up there.
No, that's,
No,
that's
So
Tom.
I
That's yours.
have the same construct, but at higher thresholds. So it starts at 1 million for married individuals, 700,000 for individual filers, 500,000 filing separately.
And that's for the investment tax.
Correct.
All right.
And you reminded me of your comments, Madam Chair, that it's also just my cousins, my best man at my wedding, two of my groomsmen, my high school friends, they left the state because it was just the taxes were so high. So people do migrate because of taxes. So I
It's
wasn't.
not just the
persuaded.
taxes, it's the cost of living.
Yeah.
Food's higher here, because unless we want to have boards with the state food, we can't grow tomatoes year round. In Kentucky, they're planting now, and their crops will be at the end of May. I don't put anything in the ground before the end of May. Our climate limits us in some ways. But that's another question. Why don't we have Patrick give us the numbers?
My hand is raised when you have a minute.
I'm sorry, I can't. There you are.
I know, you can't see me. I just have a couple comments and then would like to ask a question of Senator Chittenden. First, I think some people leave the state because they don't like mud season and they can't find a house. I also think charity will never be a substitute for appropriate taxation. Those are just my two comments. Thomas or Senator Chittenden, when you say millionaire, are you talking about someone who's making over $1 million a year?
I didn't look at his tax return, but I would have the impression that he's making more than $1 million of these types of incomes, excluding capital gains, based on the context of the conversation.
I'm just wondering generally what we mean by millionaire. What's the
$1 million
definition?
of passive
I
income.
think what the number we're using is the tax department, which is adjusted gross income of $1 million or more.
A year. Okay, thank you.
So it doesn't count your Mickey Mantle baseball card collection or where's Mickey Mantle? There he is.
I'm holding it up, Martine.
Okay. Doesn't
Thank
count
you.
that until you sell it. But when you sell it, you may end up in that top tax bracket for 1 year if you get a really good buy.
I think
So
Chris,
if you have 3 million in your 401k, but you only make 50,000 a year, you're not a millionaire?
No, because you're not drawing
That's not
it
it.
down.
It's just not.
And that's how we ended up with trouble with people getting a property tax rebate, living in a $500,000 ski condo, and they would show up occasionally. But we don't know what people's investments are. We don't, I mean, for most people, their biggest investment is their house, and we have an invest value, but you don't know what my 401k is. And I don't know what yours is, or what your retirement settlement is, or if your grandmother left you $1 million 20 years ago. So we deal with what we deal with. There are definitely wealthy individuals we aren't picking up. There are people that have trust funds that live very simply. We can only deal with what we have.
Senator Matthews and I have both had our hands up for a while. You haven't spoken yet.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
Okay.
Follow up.
I'm sure you will. I mean, I wanted to echo a couple things that Senator Gulick said. The reason that people leave the state is largely because they can't find housing. And because of factors that have nothing to do with taxation. And because a few people on the committee have anecdotal evidence of that, I think is really, I think it's repeated constantly. It is problematic. I mean, the data show that young people are much more likely to be mobile, and young people are much more likely to be moving because they can't either find housing, or they're moving for employment purposes, or because they've just graduated from college, from UVM or Middlebury or Norwich or one of the colleges in the state. And so I think that we have to be really careful with saying, well, I have a bunch of friends who said this to me that makes a difference. And I completely agree that charity and does not replace an equitable, fair, and efficient tax system. We have public things that we need to fund, including our schools, that will never be done through charity alone. And I think it's important people move to the state because we have good schools, and because we have a beautiful place to live, and because we have a fair and equitable state. And the out-migration in New England and Vermont in particular, a lot of it there was a lot of in-migration during the pandemic. We saw a huge bump in population, and now we're seeing some of those people leave. So there was an up, and now, of course, there's going to be an adjustment down. And some of it is also due to immigration policy, because a third of the people who in-migrate annually to Vermont are actually in-migrating through immigration, and that isn't happening.
Okay, no, this study broke out. This was domestic migration, and we're not gonna go there anymore. We're gonna go to the numbers.
Well, I mean, everybody's saying lots of things, so I
Yes,
just feel like everybody should get, I think a lot that has been said is based on sort of personal speculation, and if that's going to be the case in here, then everybody gets to have their chance at it. And the data on migration does not back up some of the assertions that are being said. But Chris wanted to talk, so I'll let him refute me if he would like.
I have nothing to add.
Okay.
Or rebut.
We're gonna get Pat,
I do have something to say.
we have questions on the
Oh, you
proposal.
did I say?
We have 3 proposals before us.
Yeah, I do.
If we don't have questions on the wording of the proposal, I'm gonna.
What Chris does,
You
he said,
do.
yeah.
Well, I have a question for Senator
Okay.
Chin on his proposal.
Okay,
So I skipped ahead to look at Patrick's numbers so I could figure out that $10 million number.
Yep.
Did you look into anything about looking at, the median income tax paid by those 970 people, and how many would have to leave to actually make it a loss of revenue to the state, and whether to take jobs with them because they're a business owner or anything like that?
In my defense, figured it's still crossovers. I think this bill is gonna go forward. Having this would get me enough to be comfortable with the bill so that I would figure that analysis would occur over the coming weeks. It's not very essential.
Okay, I was just curious.
let's look at the numbers. Patrick, want to come out? There.
As you know, I'm Patrick Ditterton. I'm with the Trump Fiscal Office, for the record. As I believe all of you have noticed, there's a document on the website under my name that I am going to share.
usually a declaration of partisan or nonpartisan analysis.
We do provide nonpartisan analysis to all legislators in the General Assembly.
He's giving us numbers, not statistics.
Yes. So yeah, so I guess I was gonna try to do a little bit like a holistic view. Is that big enough for everyone? Just comparing and contrasting the three proposals in front of you. So, Madam Chair, I had mentioned to you that there was an aspect of the estimates on the $500,000 threshold. That actually Jake from the tax department pointed out that there was a set missing in the analysis, so I do apologize for that.
Okay,
So previously that number, when you saw it last, was closer to 40 million. With the additional step, it's more like 30.5 million. And again, that's referring to the setting the Magi 1,000 estimated to affect about 3,200 taxpayers in Vermont. So the second proposal, which is the one that Senator Hardy put forward, that is looking at basically that 48.6 number was one we had seen previously. It's based on the federal income thresholds. I have not made any adjustment for the farm aspect because I know they're still kind of working on some of the definitional pieces of that. But that if that were to change, the number may be affected a bit.
Okay, it's not in there yet anyway.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure I mentioned that. And then, so yeah, that would be applied to roughly 12,000 taxpayers. And then the third proposal, which you all just saw, it excludes the capital gains and does have the much higher thresholds, which I've put them down here just for reference for everyone as you're comparing them. But estimating that to generate approximately $10 million in revenue and apply to less than 1,000 taxpayers in Vermont. So, you know, the higher you go with the thresholds, obviously the narrower the base you're talking about. And, you know, generally speaking, with narrower bases, we do typically see a little bit more volatility in them. Not to say volatility always to the down, it goes both directions when I use the term volatile. So yeah, just a reminder, these are the income types that are included in the federal definition. One note about the business or trade income aspect. If it's an active business that you are actively running and all that kind of stuff, it's not included. It's if you own a business that it's just purely passive for you. And yeah, and I guess quickly about the salt cap workaround piece. So, you know, I think previously when a lot of the states were looking at it and passing it, the threshold was set at $10,000, which, you know, particularly for itemizers was quite a pretty large restriction on their ability to
your property tax.
get credit for the taxes you're paying at the state level. Since it's been increased to 40,000, there's kind of two pieces. I don't know if any state who hasn't passed it is considering it, because it is quite, you know, it's quadrupling the threshold, which does amount to pretty significant savings for people on their federal return who have that type of income. And the other piece, the revenue you would expect to generate would be much less than what you've seen previously.
But you would accept even at the $40,000 cap, it could still generate some revenue. Just that analysis would need to be done.
Yeah, because the way you end up structuring it is you implement the entity tax and then you give them a credit on their personal return that you just have to calibrate that to, you know, be positive.
It is Thursday. And we do have a miscellaneous tax bill coming, and as I remember, this got somewhat complicated last time we tried it. And if we're gonna get these bills out, I'd like to get them out and not add any more than we have to get them out, because every time we add something, we're adding the risk to the bill.
I thought we did this.
We did, we passed it out of the Senate. It went through unanimously, just it didn't end up getting passed with the law. Last biennium, for different reasons.
It was the last, I thought it was two.
So,
It
it was last year, and part of it was that they were expiring this January 1st. And they really only benefit, as I remember, people who own businesses or partnerships that you have something to work through. So somebody that works for UVM and gets paid a salary won't have any benefit.
These are our small companies, so S Corps, LLCs, partnerships.
Bigger companies too. So anyway, that, I think, I'd like to keep this bill as simple as possible. And on this one, we have 3 proposals. I would like to keep all the 220 proposals for capping spending. That discussion going on 220, or we could, if that makes it the only way we can get this bill out, we can put it on here. And then tomorrow we can start on next week's stuff. But show of hands, who is interested in going forward on any of these proposals? Okay, so Sandra Chittenden.
I live with salt, so including that in configuration, but you also made a good point. All of this could be done on the miscellaneous tax.
Yes. Yeah, salt is really not relevant to this bill. It could get us challenged on the floor. Okay. So I've got 3 who are not interested. I've got 3 who are interested, and then there's me. And I'm still thinking, but I would like to see if we couldn't find something that would bring us together. And see where we can go. So. I don't know. Is there anything
No.
that could bring, I didn't.
Not at the moment, no.
All right, okay. Senator Beck, anything that could bring you on?
Yeah, I think it's enough. Or it should spend. I think we're looking for that here.
Yeah,
Well, that's why my version, I did both. I was trying to put them together, decreasing this excess spending threshold and raising revenue.
this does raise revenue, and it does put it in the, well, one of them puts it in the ad fund.
I'm sorry.
One of them, as it came to us, puts it into school construction. And when we looked at it, we thought it was 1 million, but now it looks like we've got 30, 48, and 10. Because we moved that up to the 500 and the original bill.
I think that having the conversation about decreasing costs and increasing revenue as part of the package is helpful. Because because mind you, also increasing certain kinds of revenue decreases other revenue. You know, that's what I was trying to do in my proposal, is put it in the ed fund. It decreases property taxes on everybody who's paying property taxes in the ed fund. And combining it with lowering the spending, excess spending threshold also lowers the cost of education, or the allowable cost of education, unless they spend over and vote twice. So that's what I was trying to think of it as, a sort of package that does both and really focuses on how can we reduce property taxes and come at it from both directions.
I just noticed, I don't remember if we've been through Kirby. We still have Rebecca Samaroff and Jake Feldman, the tax department, to talk about this proposal. And then we can see if the proposal that you two have put together for 220 would be something that could be supported by,
I've been working with Scott this week to figure out an area of agreement on the excess spending threshold, and we're gonna, the thing that you're
and
coming.
they are in a similar area where you are, which is excess spending on.
Okay, I would really like to look at it all together.
Okay, then we will look at it all together. First, we're gonna have Rebecca come up. And Jake, have you got something different for Rebecca on this one? We're together. Okay, you're together. All right. Then you all can decide how you present it all together.
Yeah. Thanks said something about HR one, the federal warrant bill. HR one, the
Yeah.
OBBA.
Yeah, okay, you can say anything you want.
I was,
I brought my bottle up now. You're out of order.
what a wonderful privilege. So I was at home listening to this committee before break, before town meeting day. And there was some discussion of HR one and who would benefit. I was getting a little nervous in my chair at home because the discussion I thought was not accurate. And I was wishing that I was in the chair here to correct the record. But the chair of this committee summarized HR one perfectly in 2 sentences. And what she said was that HR one is not a new benefit for higher income people. It's extension of what's been going on for the past 8 years, which is true since TCJA. That's important thing one. And when the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act happened in 2017, the legislature did increase taxes on high income earners. So she made 2 observations, which were exactly what I would have said if I had been here.
Wow. I think that's something right. Yeah, I've been getting things saying, yeah, the rich person got a $57,000 decrease, and I have no idea where that number is coming from. And they're form letters, so somebody's putting out numbers. But I'm not getting any background on the numbers, and I couldn't find anything that said that they got a new decrease. They got the old one.
Right, if you compare it to had the TCJA expired, if they had allowed that, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act to expire, then some wealthy people are getting 57,000 or whatever. But from their experience of what they pay each year in TurboTax, there's no 57,000 down.
They aren't experiencing $57,000 more in their pocket.
We just got it from.
Right. So, do you want this? Oh, is it the same as mine?
That'll work.
Over here.
That was there's a power strip up here that's closer. He's
I think Kirby said
can probably move the power strip.
Okay, so we're gonna talk about the wealth or investment proceeds tax. And I came in like 3 weeks ago and now it's changed a little bit. It's kind of narrowed a bit. But yeah, we have 4 small things to talk about. Rebecca's gonna talk about the implementation timeline. And then we're gonna talk about something I brought up last night. With the capital gains exclusion. And then we're gonna go into the types of income, a little bit more detail than what Pat has done. And then we're gonna talk about apportionment because the committee had some questions about how to apportion like the income of people who don't live in Vermont, and situated.
Great. And thanks for the record. I'm Rebecca Samrock, Deputy Tax Commissioner. Great to see everyone again. I feel like this was like similar setup as last time I was in this committee, this session where I have like a couple high level things to say and Jake has all the good weeds. But I did, in the I am not sure about the details of like each of the amendments that the crew just went through, but one at least one of the amendments I saw heading into committee today had the timeline of this tax moved up to the next tax year 26. Which was a year earlier than the prior iteration that Jake had come in
I
on.
don't
Which had been
One that is either.
That was my,
right. So just I just wanted to set expectations here that timeline for implementing a new tax type would be you know, I have the question out to our developers right now, but my assumption is that it's going to be impossible to achieve for the next tax year. That's you know, it's in a good year, like for the childcare contribution, for example, that took a whole year to implement, and we used all of that time for, you know, development in addition to, you know, all the work that goes on just ongoing for running our integrated tax system. But doing a big change like this needs some time. So I just wanted to flag that tax year 26 timeline. There's some particular challenges this calendar year as we, you know, approach the next tax year that are hard to work around. We're doing a major system update to our integrated tax system, VTax. It's kind of like going from Windows 11 to Windows, whatever happened after 11. So like the user experience is still very streamlined. There will be some, you know, new capabilities for users, but you know, kind of the goal is for it to feel mostly the same for taxpayers. But under the hood, the whole coding structure of the system is getting replaced into a different coding language, C#. So it's one of like the more major overhauls that we'll do in the system. And that work's going to be ongoing through this calendar year. So, you know, the team has definitely like squirreled away resources dedicated to legislative implementation, but there's a lot going on this year, including some of the classifications for Act 73. That's really like non-negotiable stuff. So just wanted to expectation set there that the timeline might not be workable. Likely it's unworkable for tax year 26 for this. And then also 1 year with my administration had just like, you know, I'm sure it's not a surprise that the governor is not supporting new revenue styles, raising taxes in general. So it's on the record saying that.
Okay.
I'm sure it's not a big surprise.
We're gonna cut the property taxes.
Please proceed with more fun tax
There
narrative.
we go.
Okay.
I'd like to expand a little bit on something I brought up 3 weeks ago. So this committee knows that Vermont has up to 40% capital gains exclusion. And I dug out the statutory purpose of this. And it exists, the exclusion mitigates the impact of one-time realizations and progressive tax structure, which is basically what I tried to describe. So it's a little bit rare to have a special capital gains treatment in a state, but Vermont is saying basically like, hey, you started a business, you grew it, and now you sold it off, and we're not going to ding you real hard. You know, you spent 9 years making $75,000 a year roasting your coffee, and then you sell your coffee roasting business for $5 million. You're not going to, you know, get dinged. So that's why it exists. And then I'm bringing this up because the wealth proceeds, or whatever you call it, is a tax mostly in capital gains. So it's very weird to have in a tax system a place where you give it special treatment, and then another place where you give it punitive treatment.
With one hand, we take it back.
Right. Yeah. And so that is,
it's a much lower percentage though.
it's a much lower percentage.
It's a lower percentage tax. This proposed tax, the percent.
It's 4%.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. And our top marginal rate is 8.75.
Right. So it's half of what the top marginal rate would be.
Right. So you're getting a little bit off the top marginal rate, and you're getting 4% up on
Well, if it's
Well,
excluded from the income tax, it's not taxed, right?
right, 40% of it.
40% of it's
This
not
would
taxed.
be 40%, but you'd be being taxed the 8 plus 4. So you'd be on the 60% that is taxed right now. You're excluding 40, but 60% is being taxed at whatever the rate is, and we would be adding 4% to that.
Right.
But I'm saying that the part that's not taxed would be taxed. That's not taxed under the income tax would be taxed at a lower rate.
That's true.
So
Yeah. Oh, that's good. And a little bit of detail about what's eligible for this 40%. It's the sale of assets that are held longer than 3 years, except homes, basically, whether it's primary or secondary, that's not eligible. Depreciable personal property is not eligible, except farm property or standing timber is eligible. And publicly traded stocks and bonds are not eligible. The Vermont 40% exclusion. You get 40% exclusion, but it can't go beyond 40% of your taxable income or $350,000. The 350 was brought online maybe 5 years ago when the money was needed. They truncated the capital gains exclusion. Okay, so I'm sorry that there's so much on this slide, but it's talking about like what are these things in the federal net investment income tax that now the proposal, you know, is lining up perfectly with the federal base is. Before it was like what's called an expanded wealth proceeds tax, and now it's just the same base. So capital gains would be 60% of it, according to ITEP, which is who was in here a few weeks ago. And you guys know what capital gains are. It's basically profits generated from the increase in the value of an asset, and it happens at the time of sale. And there's a question from Senator Hardy about is there a federal capital gains exclusion? The answer is no. All short-term gains are just taxed like normal income, but longer-term gains get preferential rates, and the rates they get depend on your income. If you're higher income, you might be getting a 20% rate, but if you're lower income, actually can be lower than that, as low as 0. And then I have a column for VT POT treatment, which says. Sorry, what does it say? Okay. So it's prior slide. It's prior slide. Another type of income here is dividends, which is like, you know, like profits that get distributed to shareholders of businesses mutually. Mutual funds, mostly mutual funds can also pay dividends. Qualified dividends at the federal level get the same rates as capital gains. And other ordinary dividends are just taxed like normal income. In Vermont, we're already taxing all of that stuff. So this is like a double tax of it. You get the regular taxes on it, and then if you have it, then you also get extra 4%. As Pat mentioned, rent, royalties, and trusts, this is only taxing any passive business involvement. If you're like actively working on the rental business or whatever, that's not included in the federal NIIP. It's only passive stuff. And federally that's already fully taxed, and in Vermont that's already fully taxed. Interest from bank accounts, bonds, and CDs federally in Vermont's already taxed. I actually paid this. My wife and I paid the federal NIIT this year, and I was blown away. Like, why in the world are we paying this? And she makes a lot more money than I do, but anyway, the reason is our interest from our VSECU accounts was triggering it. So that was surprising to me. We paid $16.
You just said that. I've got a CD coming due maybe today. I could be in trouble.
Yeah, be careful.
I
Don't
better
go over
go
those
see what I've
thresholds.
got.
And then the last.
Taxes pay for good things. Like, it's not like
No.
I mean, taxes pay for our schools, our roads, our infrastructure in our state, our ability to help people get Healthcare. I mean, so that's the thing that gets frustrating is that it's always talked about as like a bad thing that you have to be careful about, or like that you're gonna get dinged or punished or negative. And I mean, you guys are the tax department. You're supposed to be like, like it's like part of our civic duty to be able to help fund things in our state, for collective things in our state. And it gets really frustrating to sit at the table and have everybody just talk about it as this negative thing always. And I know that it can be administered badly, or like it be too much on some kinds of tax. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be careful about how we do it, and fair about how we do it, and effective and efficient and all those words. But taxes are meant to be part of how we make public goods for everybody. And I think that gets lost sometimes.
And you would be very happy in Canada or Europe, because that is the attitude in most of the developed world. This country was born in a tax revolt.
I don't think
And we just as a country have a very different attitude towards taxation. And it is preventing us from doing a lot of good things like single payer healthcare.
I mean, I think that part of how we can change the conversation is to be careful about how we talk about it, because we're the leaders, we're the people who are administering the taxes, we're the people who are making the tax policy. And if we talk about it as a negative thing rather than a collective responsibility, that we all need to pay our fair share to get the combined benefits, the collective good that we in this building tried to create. And we have healthy discussions about what that is. But if we're constantly like demonizing it, then it makes it really, really hard to make good public policy.
So let's move forward.
Okay, gonna talk a little bit about apportionment, which is kind of like how you attribute where your income is coming from, for paying taxes. And for regular personal income tax, apportionment is basically based on where the income is sourced. And for state residents, passive income, which is what this is trying to get at, is sourced to their state of residency. So like, I think you guys were talking about some situations of like people who live in Florida and when they owe this new Vermont tax. The answer is mostly no. Passive income goes to where you live. There are a couple exceptions. That's rents is one exception. And if you sell property, those are the two main exceptions in Vermont. Like
Okay.
if somebody in Florida sells a Vermont second home, whatever, they
pay you.
Yep. Or if you have on PIT, if you have income from a Vermont business, that also would you pay tax on that. And the chair would be familiar with this, but when an out-of-state owner sells a Vermont property, an amount is actually withheld from the transaction to ensure income tax is paid on that gain. It's called real estate withholding. And if you have this net investment, or whatever you're calling it, wealth proceeds tax, that amount in real estate withholding, we have to look at it more. Because if there's 4% tax on that in addition to regular property transfer tax, then we have to make sure it's
4%.
yeah. But it would be funny because they'd have to be really high income and I don't know, all these conditions. But anyway, that would need another look. And then talking to Will Baker, who's general counsel, we were wondering what if a Vermont resident have rental income from another state that has already taxed it? Can they get a credit for the taxes they paid in that state on this? And we're not totally sure of the answer. We're lost.
It says that the income that was made for rental would be taxed here. If it's a rental property that somebody gets income from here, they would be taxed here.
Yep.
Why would they be taxed in another state for income that's created in Vermont?
If it's a Vermont resident, but has rent coming from California,
Oh.
That would get. It would be part of this new tax. And so Will's question is like, can they claim another state tax credit for it? Because California has already taxed it.
But I'm confused. If it works in one direction, why doesn't it work in the other direction? Like if the income from a rental here in Vermont is taxed in Vermont, and it would not be taxed in another state. Wouldn't the rental income that's earned in California be taxed in California and not here?
Yeah. Yeah, no,
Okay.
California would be taxing it, but so would this wealth proceeds tax. Maybe, we're not.
They're getting an
totally sure.
income tax. No,
I'm confused.
Oh, maybe Kirby knows.
but it
But
would go
Kirby doesn't
on.
know, Kirby doesn't know the issue. So just what we have now for the language, is the reason why it's unknown is we do have the provision that brings in all of the administration from the income tax. So that kind of raises the question. If otherwise it's silent, silent means no, we don't give credit because we're not, unless we expressly are creating a credit for it, then it would be assumed that we're not. But we are bringing in the administrative provisions, and part of the administrative provisions under our income tax are to have a credit for taxes paid to another state. So I think the takeaway here is maybe it's a policy decision and it's something that you could deliberately put into the language
Okay.
of whether you want to do that or not.
So under current law for the income tax, there is a credit for taxes paid in another state.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So presumably the administration, if we were to do this, if the administration of this new tax would be easier to just stick with what we already do for income tax. Would that true or not, or doesn't it matter?
I think this is a policy decision. It's like, if we want this, we want the, someone in this non-resident situation to have, a resident Vermonter that's having a tax liability in another state that's on the same income. We've already discussed how like these same dollars will be taxed under our personal income tax and then also under this wealth proceeds tax. So they will be able to claim, we call it an OSCR or other state tax credit, against the income tax liability. And like, should they also, if that like California tax bill is big enough and their credit is big enough, should we allow it to extend to cover some of this, net, wealth proceeds tax or name liability as well.
VIP tax.
VIP, oh, of course, oh my God. I forgot to acknowledge how charming that is.
We like that name. If this doesn't happen, we should still use that.
Yeah, I'll come up with something else.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'll just point out, I threw this in because I'm always referencing this document. There's a link to our personal income tax residency and apportionment, just like 101 document that just like, I find it helpful just to like review, like, this is how we deal with, when you're a resident, how your income is taxed versus when you're a non-resident or part of your resident. And, kind of just goes through the basics of like, when you are a resident and 100% of your income is technically taxable in Vermont, how we kind of, make you whole or less than whole is using other state tax credits to make sure you're getting, credit for taxes that are paid to other states, make sure you're not getting double taxed. Whereas when you're a non-resident, we use an apportionment schedule where you're like really creating a percentage of how much of each type of income is really, Vermont's tax base versus everywhere else. So just have that as a resource. I think that's under our names today too.
Excuse me, is that it for you? Okay. Committee, I know Senator Hardy has additional retention, right?
Yeah, it's starting at 5,
Oh, at 5.
Yeah, they
I
moved
have
it to 5.
4:30 on
Yeah.
my agenda.
They moved it to 5. Yeah, that's what I just saying. Then
Okay. So we can continue. So we have to get the implementation. We have to do it in 27. 26 is this July. We can't.
Will be retro.
It would be retro. It was retro, and that was to try to align it with the education fund stuff.
Yeah, and so like if it, I mean, Rebecca explained the challenges, but from a taxpayer perspective too, like, you know, they wouldn't know this is coming. And so you'd have to do like a temporary suspension of penalties for people who have underpaid. Because if when you're making, if you're a high income person making estimated payments, you don't really know that that's.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I was just trying to align it with the education fund stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
I guess there's also a question of fairness. If you create a tax that becomes effective mid-year that you didn't know about, you weren't able to prepare for it or plan for it or put in mitigating circumstances for it. And I just wonder about the fairness of doing that.
okay, can we agree? But that we are. That we can't start it this July. We need to give, just like we did with the bill on the floor today, some time for people to know it's coming. And to perhaps make decisions based on that knowledge. We have 3 proposals before us. I think. Yeah. We will raise it, starting at 5, we can stick with everything as it is. And just the timelines, and then. Senator Chittenden, you wanted.
I'm fine.
What's in your, I mean, if we take out gross receipts and put the other things like the salt workaround. Say, cause I don't, yeah, take out the capital gains.
And that your thresholds, the 500K, and raise more money.
Okay, if we could do that, would that work for you? I'll let you all think about it.
It would be the flat 500 across the board, or did you have 500 for joint filers and then a different amount for?
I think we would scale it, right?
As drafted, it's 500 for everyone.
Across the board, but the original bill had 4 tiers, which is a little more consistent with our current state and
Yeah,
federal tax code.
it's filing jointly,
Very
filing singly, and we can do that,
Separately.
adjust the numbers,
Yeah, 3 tiers.
if that would work.
Is there a path to gain Republican support on any combination of this to make it even more feasible that this might get passed into law?
I'm for salt.
Get on board with the salt.
Yeah.
The salt workaround would do it.
I've always been supportive.
But not in combination with the investment proceeds tax.
At this point, I'm good with salt. The rest of it, do we, I mean, just kind of. We are potentially hypothetically talking about dipping our fingers into income tax, effectively passive income tax
Yeah.
for the education fund, which has a spending problem.
Universities.
Okay. Which has a spending problem.
that we created.
These people across the hall who are facing much more difficult spending decisions than the education fund might be. How are they gonna look at this? We're taking that tax capacity for the education fund. And it's taken away from the capacity, taken away from the general fund.
Plus, they are being asked to put in $10 million to buy down the tax.
105.
They're at 105 now, okay.
I mean,
To buy down the property tax rate. Well, instead of doing that, this can replace that, so they can have that 105 million.
Well, it's not gonna replace it this year.
Well, that's why I was trying to align it with this year. So I mean, this this, if you combine it with the, the wealth, what, investment income tax, the VIP tax, and the spending threshold reduction, that reduces property taxes and helps us to not have to, I mean, I don't think we should buy it down anyway. It's part of what got us into this problem, but then, it decreases the desire or the necessity in some people's mind to buy down. So they can keep that money. That's the thing, like thinking about this as a package, like how do we get a combination of decreases in spending through the spending threshold and increases in revenue and pay for some of the things that we put on the education fund over the last few years that didn't create new revenue sources for it. And those are driving property
We took
taxes
some things out.
just as much, if not more, than what's happening in the schools.
As I say we. But we're talking about ongoing revenue here. Not one time. The 105 is one-time revenue. This is ongoing revenue.
Your percent you also see is ongoing, so that's why I thought it irrational.
No, I know it's an ongoing expense. I get it, but we are talking about sending ongoing revenue out of a bucket that typically funds the general fund and putting it in the education.
It's not a bucket that funds the general fund because it doesn't exist at this point.
Well, just in general, income.
It's a tax on income.
Tax bucket.
It's a tax on
Yeah.
income.
But,
I get your point. Yeah, I mean,
It's a new tax.
It's a
on
new
income,
tax, I get it.
But it is a tax on income.
and just in, public forum in the, one of the most conservative towns I represent, this last week, somebody stood up and was like, why don't you change it, the funding of schools to income? And I'm like, well, okay, let me tell you the whole history of this. It's a long story. Come to the State House and listen to the conversation. But I mean, there are people who think we should be putting more income into the ed fund. And this is just a little dipping of the toe into that. And so it's kind of checking a lot of boxes, Scott. Come on.
But what,
It's check boxes. I
what
agree.
if we end up cutting
Yeah, very
not
easy
being
for-
able to backfill food stamps for Section 8 housing, which is in danger?
Agreed. I agree. And putting that $105 million into the education fund doesn't make any sense, and we shouldn't have done it last year either.
Okay,
Oh, Senator Gulick has her.
Senator, you,
The voice from the netherworld.
yes. I
I've,
just think disadvantage here.
I've been enjoying listening to you all. I according to the, I have to just quote this, the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. It's it's a think tank that's nonpartisan. They say just in Vermont, the HR 1 law is expected to save households with incomes in the top 1% nearly $60,000 on average each year, and over 500 times more than the expected annual savings for households with incomes in the bottom 20%, and about 37 times as much as the households with incomes in the middle 20%. So overall, more than 70% of all the benefits, $730 million in 2026 from this tax proposal, are directed to Vermonters with incomes in the top 20%. So I hear that there's deep concern for rich people. I get that. And I think this is an opportunity to fund some of the things that we need to fund in light of other cuts. And I agree with Senator Hardy. We also need to start being serious about spending. And Senator Beck, I hear you and I agree with you, but it's not an either or, we could do both. So thank you for listening, and I appreciate all of the amendments. They're really great.
Okay. Which one can you support, Senator Gulick?
I can support all three, and if you want me to put them in order of my my support, I would go with Hardy, Cummings, Chittenden.
Makes sense.
If we had a casino.
Wow. Then we can ask. Conversation.
Matos wants a casino.
There you go.
There's a bill out there that goes to the Edlem.
Oh,
The rest.
is it gonna be the Milton Casino? It's gonna be in your town.
It's in all-
Glad to have it.
There's two, one in St. John's.
Okay, we are getting ours. Gotcha.
I think it's important that we can still laugh together.
I think that is important, and I'll hope by again next week we will be together, yes.
Can I ask a question of Kirby and regarding the capital gains exclusion in the Chittenden amendment? Can you explain and tell me how much it's calibrated with what Jake presented with what we're currently exempting that 40%? Is it exactly aligned?
No.
Okay.
As Jake showed, it's a percentage of capital gains up to a cap. The way we drafted yours was because it was a little bit problematic identifying things, I actually drafted it to specify all of the types of income that falls under the federal NIIT, but leaving out capital gains is the way I did that. But the point was to leave out capital gains 100%.
And Jake, then, if a form of this moves forward, do you see any reason we should try to dissect types of capital gains to further align with our other tax code policies? Or is all capital gains?
Yes.
Minnesota took out the farm sales, right? I mean, to me, just speaking like intuitively, like if and PI and personal income tax, there's certain capital gains that get a preferential treatment. I think those are the ones that you'd also want to exclude in this tax, right? Like if you're saying that those are more sympathetic gains, then you'd want to carve them out, I think.
Thank you.
Okay.
Can we run numbers without staying up all night, for doing the capital gains exclusion to mean to put the Vermont's capital gains exclusion in the bill? Let's try the Chittenden bill to start with.
Are you?
You're excluding all capital gains. If we only exclude what Vermont excludes,
Is there a gap there?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so you get the 40% exclusion
Yeah.
and apply the 4%.
Would you allow, do you want us to take the income tax exclusion and allow a person to use it for either one? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think so.
Wait, either one
I
or
thought you
both?
both.
Both.
I mean, 'cause
that's-
either one, I mean, people are obviously gonna take the one for personal income tax because the tax rate is higher than for the. Yeah, that's the point. The 8% is higher than the 4%.
Yeah, but it
So-
cuts the
so-
value of it cuts the value of the state exclusion.
But there also is a cap, a $350,000 cap on that. So it seems to me that
If you set the threshold at 500, I would, not the math person talking here, but it seems like it would overlap enough where maybe the exclusion wouldn't be used so much. Looking at math people now.
Kirby, in the underlying bill, where did those original threshold amounts come from? What inspired those?
So it's the federal.
Those are the.
And they are in both proposals 1 and 2. The one that was kind of big.
As introduced and the Hardy version are the two that use the federal
Okay.
thresholds. Senator Cummings used 500,000.
Right.
Senator Chittenden used.
I
a
was
different
trying to make it
structure.
a truly wealth tax.
Mhm.
So I see two areas that we could tweak if we're going to move something forward. I would like to know, Senator Mathis and Senator Brock, have any comments on this, just to see if you see pathways for feasibility. But we could tweak the 4%. I mean, Minnesota did 1%, but if we did lower it and so it wasn't much of it and smoothed out, or it could be 1% at a lower amount and then 4% up at the middle at higher thresholds. If you're looking to gain more revenue. Or bringing it down to your 500,000 is an option, but we have to bring the whole 4% down. Everybody likes a complex tax code, right? Here's, So I'm just saying that's another option that we can tweak. Is there pathways where you can support versions of this?
So what I continually go back to is that, depending on what site you look at, Tax Foundation, whoever it is, Vermont will rank somewhere in the top 10% of highest tax burdens in the US. And what I come back to is we have such a small population of people that this would attain to, and rough numbers off of 2022 data from income taxes, it would probably take around 40 people to leave to start making a negative dent in what Senator Chittenden's amendment's trying to raise, that 10 million. That doesn't include any kind of business loss, anything like that.
The true.
I just want to remind you, though, that the way that at least mine is structured, and I think Senator Chintz to a degree, is that it's raising one tax to lower another tax. So
No, and I get that.
and the tax that it's lowering is the tax that everybody is very concerned about right now, and that we're hearing from constituents about, is the property tax. And so it would lower the property tax.
$10 million on 2.5 billion.
It has his hand up, and he is the witness, so we will.
Also, I gotta go pick up my kid.
But yeah, I gotta go get my kids.
Want to just tease that, that I think that taking part of the personal income tax and somehow getting it over to the education fund is gonna be quite complicated.
Yeah.
Because like in personal income tax, this is gonna be wrapped up with all these credits and these other things. So how do you know how much is this tax? It would need to really stand alone like entirely if you wanted to isolate.
We're developing a VIP tax, so we'll stand on.
The name is.
Right. I have concerns about taking some section of an income tax and putting it into education, because that sets a precedent. And I know what we're gonna raise tax money. I think it needs to be assessed across the hall with all the other needs that are out there.
Not to mention the defund.
Because we don't know what else is hurting. I know they're struggling, and I know the Ed Fund is struggling. Everybody's struggling, and it needs to be rationally portioned. So I think tomorrow, you can something to enlighten us tomorrow.
Really would.
And I'm not sure in what way, but what would this do to the Ed Fund?
What you've been talking about thus far?
Yeah,
Yeah, we can talk about that. I think it would depend, Julie Richter, JFO. Ultimately, the big picture intuition is true that revenue, all else equal, revenue going into the education fund, source other than property taxes, will then mean that less needs to be raised on property taxes. The amount that needs to be raised less on property taxes will depend on how much revenue is coming into the education fund.
but if we put in any one of these numbers and school spending goes up
That's true.
X percent next year.
Right, so in that instance, the property taxes just would not increase by the same amount.
As I would caution Senator.
And that's where I think this all, unless we we can figure out a different spending trajectory for the education fund, then we have we can't have any confidence that this money's actually gonna help taxpayers. So maybe it's, it is part of like we did back in 2018, a bigger reorganization, that includes, that different spending trajectory, which I know we have in Act 73, but that hasn't quite made it to the finish line yet.
Yeah, and I don't want to give the impression that we've found a huge amount of money in income tax that's going in and give the impression that we're going to raise, if we go with Senator Chittenden, none of these in millions, it is going to make up for what we've been moving over to buy down the present property tax.
Well, even, with Wayfair, we got
And we-
9 figures
And we
and it
ate
didn't
it
help
up.
the problem.
Well, the problem is multifaceted
Yes.
and some of it we have been trying to work on, but so much of it is just inflation, healthcare, capital costs, and student needs. Those are the 4 things that we've
Yeah,
heard over and over again.
Those are the material things, but there's also the other issue of perception. And what we do with respect to taxes and the messaging that comes out after we pass a tax bill is important in terms of public perception and public reaction to that perception and what stays in the public's mind over time. And in particular, when we focus on the wealthy, we're focused on that population that gives us the greatest bang for the buck in terms of return for the individual. And it's a population that we actually want to attract rather than chase away. And we're not doing that.
we need to attract them when they're making $200,000 and $300,000, couple filing jointly. So when they become millionaires, they stay.
We don't want to perceive ourselves as being such an outlier, which we sometimes are. We are right now in terms of our taxation of people on income taxes compared to other states.
I
The
agree.
top bracket.
I agree completely to your perception point, and that's why I think Minnesota raised the $1 million tax on net investment income revenues to fund the universal meals, and that's also where I feel the perception is.
That's exactly what the proposal that I put forward would do. And I think, and it would lower property taxes, and it would fund 2 things that we put on the education fund recently without a revenue source other than property taxes. And this would provide a revenue source for those things. And it would also lower the excess spending threshold.
True. Unless it just gets spent up. That's been the history of the education.
But the excess.
Excess.
Sorry, it's been a really long day.
Yes.
I that line on the graph.
I think it's proven to be helpful. School boards do
Okay.
mind the excess spending threshold. I know for sure that they do that,
They do.
and so it would have an impact. But maybe we need to take a break and talk about this more tomorrow. I think
So. Tomorrow is our last day. My goal is to get some version of 220 out of here.
It's gonna be hard
And
if you don't
if we
combine
can
these things.
settle this one. If we can't settle this one, there are several tax bills headed our way. And
I'm gonna just say, Madam Chair, 220 is gonna be hard for me unless we combine it with some of the things we talked about today.
okay,
So that's what I was trying to do with my amendment. And I'm not gonna just, wrench down things for schools unless we have other.
but I
things
have
in
at
the-
least 3 members for whom this bill.
I hear that. If they can put their
So-
foot down on something, so.
Okay. So we will see where we get out of here tomorrow. Everybody take a break. We've been at this for a couple hours. And we'll come back tomorrow. And we'll see if we can hash this out and we can stay as long